When you go into a doctor's office, you may know exactly what's wrong with you, and you're wanting him or her to do some tests to check to see if you're right. Other times, you don't think there's anything wrong with you. You're just going in for a little visit, and it's not uncommon for the doctors to do a workup on you, and they run some tests on you because they're trying to evaluate just where you are and where you're healthy and where you might need some help. What we want to do tonight is a little diagnosis on your marriage. We want to look at 5 threats to oneness. Now, you're going to hear the word oneness a lot during this series. And oneness is the goal of a successful marriage. The problem is that just about everything around us is trying to put a wedge between us and pull us into positions of isolation from each other. And we're going to look at that. Now, this could be, as you start to listen to it, a bit discouraging as we start to kind of unfold a real assessment of what couples are up against. But this is vital to know what to do next. And just like when you go to the doctor and they do those tests, when they finally have the diagnosis, you're actually now in the best position to get well because they know this is what's wrong and this is what we need to do. We're going to look at 5 threats that get the best of any couple out there. It doesn't matter. And we all started with a wedding. Now, I don't know what kind of wedding you had. You might have had a real highbrow wedding, spent a ton of money. Or you went through the drive-through chapel at Reno. Some guy dressed like Elvis or Engelbert What's-His-Dink or something like that. Thank you very much. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where it was and what the circumstances were. You got married. And you're just as married no matter where you got married and who was there to witness it. You might have gotten married under duress. It doesn't matter. You're married. But I'll tell you what, there's an old saying that says you're either doubled or halved on your wedding day. Now, I was quadrupled. I was a very fortunate man. But the word at the reception was that Darcy was bottom fishing. I mean, she had lost her mind. This is a bright girl. What was she thinking? But I told her, I've got potential. Work with me. And you'll see. Weddings tell us a lot. I've been to weddings. I've performed weddings. And I get such a kick out of weddings. And so does a man named Robert Fulghum. You ever heard of him? He wrote a book called Everything I Need to Know I Learned in Kindergarten. He also wrote another book called It Was on Fire When I Lay Down on It. That's the name of the book. And it's just about a bunch of different incidents that he ran across in his life. And there was this one thing he read about where there was this guy that they called the fire department because his bed was on fire, and they came in and they put it all out, and this poor guy got burnt. And he said, well, how did this fire start? He said, I don't know. It was on fire when I lay down on it. Some people just don't get it. But I want to start off our discussion on these threats looking at a wedding. And this is from his book by Robert Fulghum. It says, I have married more than 1,000 times, officiated as the minister at a whole lot of weddings, and usually managed to get so involved in each occasion that it felt like I was the one getting married. Still, I'm always looking forward to marrying again because most weddings are such comedies. Not that they are intended as such, but and listen to what he says here, since weddings are high-state occasions involving amateurs under pressure, everything never goes right. Weddings seem to be magnets for mishaps or for whatever craziness lurks in family closets. In more ways than one, weddings bring out the ding-dong in everybody involved. I will tell you the quintessential wedding tale, one of disaster. Surprisingly, it has a happy ending, though you may be in doubt, as I was, as the story unfolds. The central figure in this drama was the mother of the bride. Not the bride and groom or minister, mother. Usually a polite, reasonable, intelligent, sane human being, this mother was mentally unhinged by the announcement of her daughter's betrothal. I don't mean she was unhappy, as is often the case. To the contrary, she was overcome with joy and just about succeeded in overcoming everybody else with her joy before the dust settled. Nobody knew it. But this lady had been waiting with a script for a production that would have met with Steven Spielberg's approval. A royal wedding fit for a prince's bride. And since it was her money, it was hard to say no. The father of the bride began to pray for an elopement. His prayers were never answered. She had 7 months to work, and no detail was left to chance or human error. Everything that could be engraved was engraved. There were teas and showers and dinners. The bride and groom I met with only 3 times. The mother of the bride called me weekly and was in my office as often as the cleaning lady. The caterer called me to ask if this was really a wedding or an invasion he was involved in. Invasion, I told him. An 18-piece brass and wind ensemble was engaged. The church organ simply would not do, too churchy. The bride's desires for home furnishings were registered in stores as far east as New York and as far south as Atlanta. Not only were the bridesmaids' outfits made to order, but the tuxedos for the groom and his men were bought. Not rented, mind you, bought. If all that wasn't enough, the engagement ring was returned to the jeweler for a larger stone, quietly subsidized by the mother of the bride. When I say this lady came unhinged, I mean unhinged. Looking back, it seems now that the rehearsal and dinner on the evening before the great event were not unlike what took place in Napoleon's camp the night before Waterloo. Nothing had been left to chance. Nothing could prevent a victory on the coming day. Nobody would ever forget this wedding, just as nobody ever forgot Waterloo, for the same reason, as it turned out. The juggernaut of fate rolled down the road, and the final hour came. Guests in formal attire packed the church. Enough candles were lit to bring daylight back to the evening. In the choir loft, the orchestra gushed great music, and the mighty mother of the bride coasted down the aisle with the grandeur of an opera diva at a premiere performance. Never did the mother of the bride take her seat with more satisfaction. She had done it. She glowed. She beamed. She smiled and she sighed. The music softened, and 9, count them, 9 chiffon-draped bridesmaids lockstep down the long aisle while the befrocked groom and his men marched stolidly into place. And finally, oh so finally, the wedding march thundered from the orchestra. Here comes the bride. Preceded, of course, by 4 enthusiastic mini princesses chunking flower petals and 2 dwarfish ring bearers, 1 for each ring. The congregation rose and turned in anticipation. Ah, the bride. She had been dressed for hours, if not days. No adrenaline was left in her body. Left alone with her father in the reception hall of the church, while the march of the maidens went on and on, she had walked along the tables laden with gourmet goodies and absent-mindedly sampled first the little pink and yellow and green mints. Then she picked through the silver bowls of mixed nuts and ate the pecans, followed by a cheese ball or 2, some black olives, a handful of glazed almonds, a little sausage with a frilly toothpick stuck in it, a couple of shrimps blanketed in bacon, a cracker piled with liver pate. To wash this down, a glass of pink champagne. Her father gave it to her to calm her nerves. What you notice as the bride stood in the doorway was not her dress, but her face. White, bleached white. For what was coming down the aisle was a living grenade with the pin pulled out. The bride threw up, just as she would walk by her mother. And by throw up, I don't mean a polite little lady like into her handkerchief. She hurled. There's just no nice word for it. I mean, she hosed the front of the chancel, hitting 2 bridesmaids, the groom, a ring bearer, and me. I'm quite sure of the details. We have it all on videotape. 3 cameras worth. The mother of the bride had thought of everything. Having lost everything that was in her stomach, as well as the last of her dignity, the bride went limp in her father's arms, while her groom sat down on the floor where he had been standing, too stunned to function. And the mother of the bride fainted, slumping over in ragdoll disarray. We had a fire drill then and there at the front of the church that would make Dumb and Dumber look like they knew what they were doing. Groomsmen rushed about heroically. Many princess flower girls squalled. Bridesmaids sobbed. And then people with weak stomachs headed for the exits. All the while, unaware, the orchestra played on. The bride had not only come, she was gone into some other state of consciousness. Napoleon and Waterloo came back to mind. Only 2 people were seen smiling. One was the mother of the groom. And the other was the father of the bride. So what did we do? Well, we went back to real life. Guests were invited to adjourn to the reception hall, though they did not eat or drink as much as they might have in different circumstances. The bride was consoled, cleaned up, fitted with the bridesmaid's dress, and hugged and kissed a lot by the revived groom. She'll always love him for that. When he said for better, for worse, he meant it. The cast was reassembled where they left off. A single flute played a quiet air. The words were spoken and the deed was done. Everybody cried, as people are supposed to at weddings, mostly because the groom held that bride in his arms through the whole ceremony. If one can hope for a wedding that is memorable, then theirs was a raging success. Nobody who was there will ever forget it. They lived as happily ever after as anyone does, happier than most, in fact. They have been married about 12 years now and have 3 lively children. But that's not the end of the story. The best part is still to come. On the 10th anniversary of this disaster, a party was held. 3 television sets were mustered. A feast was laid and best friends invited. Remember, there were 3 video cameras at the scene of the accident. So all 3 films were shown at once. The event was hilarious, especially the running commentary. The part that got cheers and toasts was when the camera focused on the grin on the face of the father of the bride as he contemplates his wife as she's being revived. And the reason I say this is the best part is not because of the party, but because of who organized it. Of course, it was the infamous mother of the bride. She's still at it, but she's a lot looser these days. She not only forgave her husband and everybody else for their part in the debacle, but she forgave herself. And nobody laughed harder at the film than she. There's a word for what she has. It's a word that we want to make sure that every one of you have in your hearts when you leave here. It's called grace. She has grace. And that's why that same grinning man has been married to her for 40 years and why her daughter loves her still. I don't know what kind of wedding you had. I don't know what kind of incidents have happened since then. You might have some very hilarious, difficult moments in your life and some that are not funny. They hurt to think about them. No matter what, though, we need to have things in place, metal in our heart and in our marriages that get us through no matter what happens. Maintaining oneness is the critical issue in marriage. And how does an enthusiastic, optimistic, and hopeful marriage run into disaster? It happens to a lot. It happens to far too many. Couples today are threatened by forces that can destroy oneness in marriage. Let's look at the first threat to oneness, and that is difficult adjustments threaten oneness. Difficult adjustments threaten oneness. There is little in our culture today that encourages two people to make the difficult adjustments required to achieve marital oneness. There's little in our culture. Now, see that word little? I would cross that out, and I would write nothing over top of it. There is nothing in our culture that encourages two people to make the difficult adjustments required to achieve marital oneness. Everything in our culture works against us. And it works overtime, and it's relentless. On the next page, you see a chart. And it looks at the sociological changes that have happened in the family in a very brief period of time. And some of us can remember, I was born in 1950, so I was there for half of that century. But I also I love history, and so I love to read so much about what happened. And I've been especially interested in 20th century history over the years. In fact, 19th century history also. And as we look at this, it is amazing how radically different families are in such a brief period of time. On the left side, we look at the 1900s. And when it came to how society viewed family, in the 1900s, home and family were highly valued. But in this century we're in, homes are being devalued, fragmented, placed in a high-speed, hurried context where it's hard to keep things straight and keep love online. Religion was an esteemed part of our culture. It was a substantive part of our culture in the 1900s. A lot of families pivoted around their religious beliefs. They were defined by their religious beliefs. Religion in today's culture is viewed as something that should be kept separate from our culture. It's compartmentalized. It's more symbolic. It's something you do on Sunday or Saturday or whatever it is. It might be something that you do to kind of soothe yourself. It's like a salve you take. But it's not something that realigns your thinking and defines how you process life. If we were to take the way religion is viewed today and go back in time to 1950 and mention that to the average person in our country, they'd think, you have lost your mind. Are you absolutely nuts? How could you separate these two? How could you possibly think that you can put your religious beliefs in some kind of a, emotional and intellectual lockbox that you open up when it's just convenient to you? It just wouldn't fathom. Well, that's more the norm today. Our influences were much more up close and personal, locally. And there was some national influence, especially in the back part of the 20th century. But now we have much more global influences, and we're far more homogenized in the way we view ourselves, and sometimes the way we view our country. How about worldview? And by the way, everybody has a worldview. Every human being has one. But there are worldviews that are accurate and actually work for you, and there's worldviews that are inaccurate and they just kind of blow up in your face. They let you down. Well, our worldview as a culture has radically changed. As we went through the 20th century, it was a century primarily grounded on a Judeo-Christian ethic. We had a set of rules that everybody bowed to. They were called the 10 Commandments. And we figured, okay, doesn't matter where you go to church or if you go to synagogue or you don't go at all to either place. We all kind of agreed these 10 rules, these 10 Commandments make sense. And if we go by them, we can actually all get along a lot better. Rule of law makes more sense with those things at the backdrop. The business arena makes more sense. Relationships are more easier to justify. But now we live in what's called a postmodern era, where we have jettisoned moral absolutes as a people. Now, you may not have yourself individually, but the world you're living in has. And so people struggle, especially our children, the next generation coming along. They're highly exposed to an ethical community that is under the impression that God gave Moses the 10 suggestions, not the 10 commandments. That he came down from Sinai with these things on a couple of etch-a-sketches. You don't like what you see? No problem. Just turn it over, shake it, turn the knobs, make it more convenient to you. It's on a whiteboard, and you can adjust it. Or, hey, you can blot some of them out. You say, I like 3 of the 10. I'm going to go by 3 of the 10. That's the world we're living in. In the 20th century, you clearly saw the emergence of national media like television, radio, the internet as the primary influence of the worldview. Televisions hit saturation in the average American home. You know, historically, they say somewhere between 1950, 52, 53, televisions were considered a commodity in the average home. It had hit like 15% of American homes. And once it hits that, they say, okay, it's taken over, and pretty soon it's going to be in every home. We had a very large TV when I was a kid. Had a very small screen on it. Very large TV. I became enamored with television from the day I was born. I'd get up on Saturday morning with my siblings. I was from a family of 6. And we get up, and you know, our parents are like parents are today on Saturday morning. They want to sleep in and get some extra rest, so they'd sleep in. But we'd get down, we turn on the television, and we get some, you know, our cereal and our juice, and we sit down there in front of it, and we turn it on, and we'll watch cartoons. They had cartoons when we were kids. But sometimes we'd get up real early. And back then, they didn't have 24-hour programming like they do today. And so we turned it on, and there'd be a thing called a test pattern on. Any of you remember test patterns? We'd watch it. We'd watch it. There was a tone that it had on it. We found it on the piano. It was an E flat. We'd sit and harmonize to it. The television started to tell us how to think. And when it first came out, everybody was on the same page. But then when world conflict took place, it was amazing how the news agencies started to really have an impact on how we viewed ourselves and how we viewed the world we lived in. In World War II, if you wanted to find out what was happening on the front, you went to the movie theater and you watched a newsreel. They were in black and white. They did not show dead American soldiers in those newsreels. They showed dead enemy soldiers in them. Vietnam came, and it was in color, and it was coming off a satellite, and it happened that day. Now, we have moved to a time when instead of the national media emerging, it is dominating us, and it's shaping our worldview. I mean, you can sit there and look at your phone and have newsreels coming in. You can actually have things fed into your Palm Pilot showing you real-time things that are happening. And these things, they affect us and how we view ourselves. What's the most popular type of shows on television? Reality television. We are so out of touch with reality that we actually have to have somebody show us what it looks like. But most people on reality shows are living an illusion. I mean, you know, it just doesn't happen that way. It's amazing what entertains us. And then look at marriage. Look at how much that has changed. The century before us, it was a commitment that was highly valued. But we've been affected by the increase in divorces. A lot of factors caused divorce to become more prevalent. No-fault divorce, where we made it easy to get out of a covenant and a commitment. A lot of the birth control things that came along gave women a lot more of a sense of freedom and men a lot more of a sense of irresponsibility. And all these things factored in. The changing in the work arena, with women becoming far more a part of a career model than a marriage model. All these things got the best of us. And marriage is seen in the past as an interdependent relationship. Now it's seen more as independence is valued over interdependence. In fact, every once in a while, you see couples getting together, and before they will say "I do" to each other, they actually have to write out how we're going to maintain our personal territory when we get on the other side of this. We have prenuptial agreements, just one of the formal ways to do it, but even without those, a lot of couples say, I'm going to have my stuff, I'm going to have my space, I'm going to do my thing, I don't want this to change anything, and I have my moods and all that stuff, and I don't want you to get after me about all that stuff. That is not the way marriage used to be. Marriage roles were commonly accepted, especially in the first part and up to the first 3 quarters of the 20th century. Everybody kind of knew this is what a husband does, this is what a wife does, this is what a father does, this is what a mother does. Now, were there flaws in some of those things? Of course. And if people were misguided and corrupted in their own heart, there could be a lot of damage done. But we don't eject the good idea just because we have some people in the midst of there that have lost their way. Well, we decided we'll jettison the good idea. And now, marriage roles are confused and challenged. And then look at how fatherhood has changed. Fathers were present and active in kids' lives. And we move to a time where too many of them are passive or even absent. It's not that they're divorced, they're just preoccupied with their work and their careers and their interests and their hobbies. I want to tell you though, today I happened to walk down the street here and I saw 2 different fathers. One had his son, and his son was kind of sitting on his lap, and the boy wasn't a little boy, he was a boy about maybe 7, 8, and the boy's head was right underneath the father's head, and the father was kissing him on his head and holding him because the boy was tired. And I thought, that's great. And then the next one was father with an infant, and the mother was going off into an ice cream place, and the baby was kind of cranky, and the father was just being very patient with it. That's what fathers should do. But those were unique. Those were more exceptional things to the standard father out there. How about mothers? They were highly valued and esteemed. And I suppose they always will be because of that connection that anybody has to the womb of their mother. But now, motherhood is devalued. It's often disparaged in the world we're living in. Women that choose to focus their total attention as far as their young years or their 20, 25 years of their life, now I'm going to pour my life into grooming these children that I've given birth to. They're looking at it and they say, well, why would you waste your life like that? And by the way, any of you women that have chosen that, don't let anybody ever tell you you've wasted your life. You have absolutely struck gold in the choice you've made and pouring your life into those. All mothers love their kids, and you have a chance to set up somebody that's going to affect time and eternity. And so you can never have thrown away your life to pour your life into your children. But that's not the way a lot of people feel. And then when you look at the problems that have happened with fathers and mothers, you know what one of the outcomes of this with our busy lives and our career-oriented things and our highly consumptive world is there's a lot of couples that have technically sexless marriages. They're just too busy. They're too tired. They're too focused. They're too depressed sometimes to have an active sexual life. And when it comes to parenting, many of them are just flat clueless, overwhelmed. They're like the deer caught in the headlights. They just don't know what on earth happened here. Children were always considered a blessing. Now, for a lot of parents, they look on them as burdens. They overwhelm them. What's the result? Well, in the past, family life was imperfect, but at least it was intact. And it was meeting the 3 driving inner needs of those children. Those inner needs are for secure love, a significant purpose, and a strong hope. And because moms and dads and marriages were tight, they could meet those 3 inner needs very well. Now, because of the problems we're facing, so many kids are growing up insecure, feeling insignificant, and feeling powerless. Your marriage is being influenced by the rapid changes in your culture. Now, you may look at that and say, well, that may be where we are on the right. Fortunately, that's not where we are. Well, I hope you're not there. But I'll tell you what, you're living in a world where people are there. This is clearly defining culture as we know it. As you turn the page, you see that we have contrasting backgrounds that bring about painful adjustments for a couple in several areas. For instance, you get married, and you find that your values are quite different. Darcy, my wife Darcy, came from a family of 6 kids. I from a family of 6 kids. So we had that in common. She had 4 brothers and a sister. I had 4 brothers and a sister. That's the only similarities we had. She was from a politically liberal Democratic family. I was from a politically conservative Republican family. We were very different in the way we were brought up, in the way her parents viewed each other, and the way my parents viewed each other. We were different in the way her father saw his role in his kid's life and my dad saw his. We both came out of our families with a real strong work ethic, and that was good. But we came out of our families with a very different play ethic. And so you get these things, you think, what on earth are we going to do? How are we going to adjust to these differences in values? How about vocations? She came from a white-collar, professional family. I came from a blue-collar family, a tradesman's family. Her father carried a briefcase to work. My father carried a toolbox to work. Her father's hands were soft and his nails were clean. My father's were rough and calloused, and there was always dirt under his nails. How about religion? I came from a very, very strong religious home. We were in church whenever the doors were open. Darcy did not come from that kind of a family. They had some symbolic involvement in church at key holidays, Christmas and Easter, but other than that, if you ask, what is their church preference, they say, well, one would say, I like beige stucco. Well, I like the ones with the pretty, steeples on it. I mean, they had no idea what all that was about. Finances. It's not uncommon for 2 people to get married to have very different attitudes towards money. And this creates a great deal of stress in marriages. A lot of couples have today, what I think they get sucked into what I call the success illusion, in that culture dictates what a successful person looks like and some of the amenities that they enjoy. And then we come along and say, well, I can't possibly do that where I am. How do I look that way? Well, it's actually easy. If you're willing to go into debt up to your eyeballs, it's easy. Have you seen that commercial where the guy's playing golf? He says, I'm in debt up to my... I borrowed everything. Somebody help me. Well, that's what a lot of couples... That commercial actually hits very close to home on a lot of couples because they're upside down financially. You may be one of those couples. You got to understand, when you're not solvent, when you're financially upside down, this puts incredible stress on your marriage. Your emotional system is worked over by that. I just see so many couples that get buy into this fake it till you make it syndrome. And it steals a lot of joy. How about family history? You might have come from a really good family. You had strong patriarchal and matriarchal roles in your parents and grandparents. You had several generations, and there was a real camaraderie and encouragement, and like a cheerleading section for each child. There are certain nationalities that lend themselves to that, and I grew up in a lot of a very ethnic, diverse community in not only in the Pittsburgh area but also down in Maryland, and I just loved seeing how, especially for instance, I had a lot of Jewish friends and how tight those families were. I had a lot of Italian friends, very tight. And so you might have had it going for you, but others, you say, look, here's Here's our family history. Let's see. There's a lot of regret, ton of anger, betrayal. There is alcoholism, drug addiction. There's prison time. There's all these things. So you bring that in, and it may be that one of you is that way, and another one came out of maybe something that was a lot stronger. Regardless, that's part of the difficult adjustments that we all must face. And then there's past relationships. The average couple getting married today was sexually active before they got married. Maybe not with each other, but with somebody. Well, you got to understand that that's part of the historical record that you bring to the marriage. And that's why it takes a while for couples to really start to connect. The average married couple takes 4 to 6 years before they really start picking up a good cadence in their relationship. Remarried couples, the average one takes 7 to 9 years before they really feel like we're making it. Now, I just gave you a little tip-off. If you're in one of those times where you think, we're not going to make it, we're not going to make it, if you will just gut it out and not say, die in the middle of that, and not quit, you will be amazed what's waiting for you if you just gut it out. But too many people say, this isn't worth it. I'm giving up. How about painful experiences? You know, a lot of you have had painful experiences. Before we're done, we'll all have painful experiences. And these tests are resolved. And then there's the following superficial motivations for marriage require shocking adjustments. What's the number one reason why people get married? Their feelings. Their feelings. Here's the problem with feelings, though. They're unreliable. I meet people all the time who, it could easily categorize them as people who think with their emotions. They think with their emotions. Okay, now, every once in a while I'll say, like, if you don't get anything else, I say, get this. Okay, I'm about to do one of those, right? I'm about to tell you something that if you get it and it clicks, you're going to be light years ahead. You should never, ever think with your emotions. Okay? Now, you say, well, why? Simple. Emotions have no capacity to think. They have no clue how to think. They only know how to feel. And as such, they do not have to feel accurately. They can give you wrong readings all the time. I mean, you go to weddings and you can't stop crying. You go to a funeral, you can't stop laughing, cracking jokes. Poor guy's dead. Family's in mourning. And you say, did you hear the one? You know, he looks like, you know, what are you doing? Well, why does that happen? Well, you see, our emotions are a lot like, they're wired a lot like that circuit breaker box on our houses or our apartments. You know that thing? If you're, let's say, you know, you're blow drying your hair and you're drinking a cup of coffee. I do that every once in a while. I've always wondered, is this a good combination here? Or something, you know, you drop the blow dryer in the sink, and you could get electrocuted. You could kill yourself. And so they have these things, these ground fault interrupters or breakers out on your circuit breaker box, or maybe something that's short circuited and it would set the house on fire. Well, these things pop when they get overloaded. They just pop, and that keeps you from having a fire or something like that. Well, our emotions are a lot like that. They get overloaded and they pop. And they become very unreliable. They do not think reasonably. In fact, people today would rather feel good than do good. They'd rather feel right than do right. There was a song that once had a line in it, how can it be wrong when it feels so right? Well, it can be wrong all the time. I don't care how it feels. But people get into this. How about sexual attraction? Now, by the way, I have no problem with people being sexually attracted to each other when they get married. In fact, if you weren't sexually attracted to each other, I would have a bigger concern about that. This is why we get married. And by the way, don't let anybody tell you anything else. The reason you got married was for sex. You say, no, we just wanted to be together and we wanted to share our dreams and our goals together. You don't have to get married to do that. We just like to eat dinner together and just kind of dream. Once again, you don't have to get married to do that. You got married for sex. That's fine. It's just that those honeymoon feelings don't sustain themselves very well. After a while, you think, golly dang, that was fun, but, he's kind of nuts. She's kind of persnickety. She's really a micromanager. You don't realize this because, all those nice little moody things. It's just why people get married. How about cultural and family pressures? You're at Thanksgiving. You're 29 years old. Your drunk Uncle Harry says, "Why aren't you married yet?" You want to say, well, probably for the same reason you're still stupid after all these years. What do you mean, why am I not married yet? What am I supposed to do? Just find somebody with a pulse and say, okay, you're it. No, you're supposed to fall in love. Well, I have no control over this. But sometimes you get enough pressure on you. It might be a parent or a relative, and next thing you know, or your friends are all getting married. What am I going to do now? Got to get married. Find Mr. Right or Mr. Somebody or just Mr. And there he is. And you get married. A lot of people get married for escape. There's a lot of stress at home. Maybe they're under financial pressure and they meet somebody who can take that away. Maybe they have parents that are just really being abusive. But a lot of times these situations are a lot like the person who is drowning and they look out and they see a log in the water and they, oh great, I'll grab onto that. And it's the tail of a crocodile. I say, boy, we have some serious problems here. And then there's differing expectations about marriage in several areas. And these result in unexpected adjustments. For instance, the roles. Who does what? What you tend to do is you assume the role of your spouse is whatever that corresponding gender was in your family, like your dad. So you get in bed at night. And husband's already just about in a coma. And the wife gets in, and she snuggles, did you do the locks on the doors? Did you check the windows? Well, you're in last. What's your problem? I mean, you know how to check a lock? My father always checked the doors before he went to bed. You know his number. Call him up. Have him come up. What is your problem? Why are you asking me to do this? I'm asleep. Well, that's part of the problem. When we got married, Darcy let me know that anything that required a tool was my job. Outside, everything requires a tool. Lawnmowers, chainsaws. Man, I love chainsaws. Got to have a chainsaw. You don't even have any trees? Get a chainsaw. I live in Arizona. There are no trees. Get a chainsaw. You're going to trim the roses, honey. Get a chainsaw. Got to hang a painting. She goes, picks out the painting. She loves the painting. Brings it home. But I got to hang it. Why? Tack hammer. See, nails. Those are tools. I don't know how to cook. She takes care of that. She's a great cook. But see, this causes problems when we find ourselves having to move into the other person's realm. For instance, in this cooking thing, I really did not learn how to cook. I do not know how to cook to this day. I can make cereal or something like that. I can make ice, but that's about my repertoire. So if you come to my house, I got those two things going for us. So every once in a while, Darcy goes on a trip, and I'm left in charge. Now, it's just something about me. I don't like any of the kids to die in my watch. I'm just like that. I don't want her coming home finding children that could be, poster children for crop failure. So I'm going to keep them alive. And so she leaves, but she knows that I cannot cook. So she basically packs all their lunches before she leaves. She left one time, about a year and a half ago, she left on a trip to see her mother, and she had packed every one of their school lunches for 5 days. Because she knew, you can't pack a lunch. I would just, I put a loaf of bread in there, here's some peanut butter and jelly, jars of that, here's a knife, go for it, have a good time. But at dinner, you got to have a dinner. So I came in this one particular evening, first night, and she had put a menu on the refrigerator with instructions. Take the Stouffer's lasagna out of the freezer, microwave it, feed it to the kids. Seemed pretty easy. I should have read more carefully, because there was actually an adjective in front of lasagna, Stouffer's lasagna. You say, what's the big deal? Well, our big microwave that goes with our oven range, it's a fairly new piece of equipment in our kitchen, but it had been recalled. It had been recalled about a couple weeks before this event. They sent us a letter in the mail saying, there's something wrong with your microwave. Do not use it. It'll melt your face off. We're going to come and fix it. In the meantime, we had a standby, a little smaller microwave. Now, I looked in the freezer and I pulled a lasagna, frozen lasagna. It was a Claim Jumpers lasagna. Now, this Claim Jumpers lasagna was real wide. It would have fit perfectly into our microwave, except that microwave didn't work. It would not go into the smaller. The Stouffer's would have gone in there perfectly. But I just see lasagna. I'm random in the way I process life. I see lasagna, there you go. Here we go. Well, the problem was it wouldn't fit. So I got the biggest knife I could find in the drawer out, and I'm trying to chop this thing in half. But it was brick hard. Men love tools of mass destruction. And I thought, I got something out in the garage that can solve this problem. So I went out of the garage. The first thing is I got my miter box, and I put the thing in there, and I'm just trying to saw that thing in half. But the cheese is gumming the saw up. And then I saw my skill saw down there, my cordless skill. That's perfect. So I put a towel on the floor to catch the one half, put the thing in there, and just went right through it, just perfect, just like it was buttered, perfect. Well, as I was doing this, it was just after dark. The garage door was up, so I'm all backlit inside the garage. There was a college student going door to door in our community selling magazine subscriptions. And he was approaching our garage, our home, just as I did this. When the whine of the saw stopped, I heard this, Sir, may I speak to you? So I came walking out. I had half a lasagna in this hand, my skill saw in this hand. Came out into the darkness, saw this guy. Yeah, what's up? He looked at my hand, and then he looked over my shoulders. Did I just see you saw a lasagna in half? Yeah, I'm fixing dinner. I mean, that was it for this guy. He didn't want to talk to me anymore. There's a lunatic bonehead living in his house. He probably can't read. I'm moving on. See, we have very different expectations of each other. And Darcy expects me to read the adjective in front of lasagna and do it right and not take and saw the kid's dinner in half. How about expressions of love? It's not uncommon for one who's very public in their expression of love to marry somebody who is very private. And so they're just wanting to be lovey-dovey all over you, and you're saying, could we find a room? How about sexual performance? Oh man, is that different in a lot of couples? What excites one turns off the other. Lady reads in one of the women's magazines, the average couple has sex 1.5 times a month or something. The guy's over there and he's reading some world record magazine. Here's a couple here did 481 times in 1 year. I know we could top those guys, man. How about plans for the future? Sometimes we find that we're on very different pages when it comes to our careers, our kids, whether we want to have an adventurous life or a more sedentary life. One's a very much of an explorer type person. They're married to a settler that doesn't want to move on from there. Guess what? What's the result? The threat number one. When couples fail to make the necessary adjustments to move towards oneness, isolation is inevitable. If you don't have a plan for working through these adjustments, it'll get the best of you. Let's look at one more here, and then we're going to take a break. Threat number 2, couples entering marriage equipped only with the world's pattern will find their oneness threatened. Let me say that one again. And threat number 2, couples entering marriage equipped only with the world's pattern will find their oneness threatened. The world's pattern is a 50-50 performance relationship. That's what the average couple goes in to a marriage with. You do your part, I'll do my part. I actually performed a wedding for a nice couple, and at the rehearsal dinner, a very intoxicated relative got up and basically said this very thing. He's making a toast to them, and he said, marriage is a 50-50 proposition, and you do your half, and you do your half, and may you know how to divide it down the middle, or something like that. When you're officiating at a wedding, you feel that, you got to know, I see my job as, well, I mind everybody's business. It's my job. And so I pulled them aside afterwards. So you remember that one toast that your relative gave there? You better not listen to that. You better not go by that, or this marriage is dead on arrival. It will not work, because you see, when you have the 50-50 performance plan, it makes each one of you scorekeepers. And you're trying to track whether you're doing your half and the other person's doing their half. There's an old proverb. I don't know who wrote it. It's some guy named Anonymous or something. I mean, that guy is so prolific. He said some of the most profound things. Anyway, somebody said, each mule thinks his load is the heaviest. And you just automatically look at the other person through your eyes and you assume you're pulling more weight. Acceptance is based upon performance. You do your part and I'll do mine. Giving is based on merit. Affection is given when one feels it's deserved. Motivation for action is based upon how one feels. What do we say about feelings? They're unreliable. They give us wrong readings. 50-50 deals become 40-40, 30-30, 20-20, nothing. When you become a scorekeeper. The world's pattern, this 50-50 performance relationship, is destined to self-destruct because my inability to meet unreal expectations. I cannot meet expectations that I don't even understand. They're unrealistic, and each couple feels that way. The impossibility of knowing my mate has met me halfway. Where is the dividing line? It moves all the time. The tendency to focus on the weaknesses in my mate. And when you focus on what's wrong with a person, that's all you will see. You understand that? That's all you will see. It doesn't matter. 98% of their life can be going right. You focus in on that 2%, that's all you're gonna understand. And that's all, it's just gonna bug you over and over again. And my disappointment in my mate will just paralyze my performance. Paralyzes theirs too. I mean, after a while, you learn hopelessness in this stuff and helplessness. If you feel like no matter how hard you try, it's not enough for your spouse. And finally you say, what's the use? Why even bother? And then you have this desire to get revenge when you're wronged. What is the result of threat number 2? The logical result of the world's pattern for marriage is isolation. Now, you're saying, boy, am I glad we came here. I mean, so far, all I've done is depressed you. Remember, this is a lot like a diagnosis. We're just kind of looking at all the options out there, and these are the things that are threatening every one of us. But when we get through these, then we're going to be in a position to say, okay, now here's how you counter every one of them. Here's how you put in place a plan that works.
That was Tim Kimmel with 2 of the 5 threats to marriage. The remaining threats are discussed by Family Life Weekend to Remember speaker Dave Wilson on the next CD.